All right. Well, we're excited to talk about Siemens Healthineers, engineering success, pioneering healthcare together. This is Team 4. Kyle Bennett, the voice of currently Justin Rhodes, Cora Van Dyke, Chad Holbrook, and Brian Barker. So let's first talk about Siemens. Siemens is a huge company. They were founded in 1847, over 170 years ago. Currently, they participate in over 200 countries. And, I think in my life, I have had access to so many of their products. I know that they're very well known for their gas and wind turbines, power generation, and infrastructure solutions. That's some of the biggest things, especially in Europe. Um, but what we're going to want to talk about is further down the line is we really want to talk about Siemens medical imaging equipment and laboratory diagnostics, because that is actually the plant we're going to go to. But I thought it was important to talk about Siemens as a global company, simply because of how absolutely huge they are. So they've been in China for a long time, but let's talk about their Healthineers people. What are the major accomplishments of the Siemens? What they called themselves initially was Siemens Healthcare. In 1896, they produced the very first industrial X-ray tube. If you go online and you look up this, it is kind of ugly looking. It looks like something that belongs in your great-grandma's office. But it was the first industrially manufactured X-ray tube. Since then, they've made so many advancements. For example, first real-time ultrasound scanner for all you mothers out there in 1967. 1998, first track-based laboratory automation system. Come around to 2001, we're starting to get into the MRIs and CT scans. Now he's starting into the new century. Once again, there was a huge focus on the equipment. That's been obviously since the beginning. Now, in 2009, I think it's important to touch on, they started making a change into equipment to technology solutions. They started working on 3D imagery. If anyone has looked into 3D imagery of like a heart or a brain, they were some of the pioneers for it. Taking that same idea of IT and applying it to their already existing hardware. In 2012, they started working on wireless transducers for ultrasound. Once again, 1967, they produced the ultrasound, and now in 2012, they're still making updates to that technology. It's absolutely impressive what they can do. They provide a wide range of solutions that have been around for a very long time. Now, what's really smart, what Siemens did is in May of 2016, they changed their name from Siemens Healthcare to Siemens Engineers. And I think that was really important. Why? Well, when they make that change, they're going from someone who's providing a healthcare solution, it sounds more like a doctor or a nurse, to someone who's trying to provide superior technology. Like, their focus was not on doctors and nurses, their focus is on the technology to help doctors and nurses. They want to engineer and solve problems and be pioneers in the equipment industry. A couple of their things you see here is they did focus in on the customers. Now, when they changed their names, go to the next slide. The couple of things I thought was really important to talk about them is some of the impact that this company has had. And this is a picture that came out of some of their marketing material. And nothing like the marketing guys to tell you everything that the company does. Some of the things that were truly impressive is 1.808 billion people have access to some type of Siemens Healthineer product. That is a sixth of the population that this company serves, just the Healthineers division. They are the biggest supplier of medtech infrastructure. So that's a lot of the technology that helps doctors provide solutions to their patients. They see, and this is just astounding, 209,000 patients every hour. Their products touch that many lives every single day, and that's truly impressive. And as far as themselves, they have over 46,000 employees in just the Healthineer division. Once again, we've gone from the big Siemens company down to the Siemens Healthineers division, and they still have over 46,000 employees and are providing this much improvement in the lives of the world, essentially. Now, Siemens, currently, despite what they've done in the past, these are some of the things that they currently are taking care of. They do medical imaging and laboratory diagnostics. That's the pictures, that's the software behind a lot of this. And I think it'll be interesting to talk to them about what are they doing with that software. They are clinical and specialties and diseases. A big one, and we're going to touch on this one in the future, is their IT services. And managed services. They do a lot of consulting. I know for a fact that I have family members who have received consulting that work in the medical industry from Siemens on their technology and how their technology helps the system of a hospital function more correctly. Now, I said 42,000 employees in the previous slide. 32,000 of those employees are suspected to be in China. I believe that is the case. What we found is the place we are going to go visit is in fact massive and should have quite a few employees and a fairly large structure to the company.
Sorry, trying to unmute myself. So this is Brian, and I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of what the Healthineers have set as their standards and goals and kind of their structure of the company. So the goals and values of Siemens overall is one of those things that they've kind of projected upon all the divisions. And their mission statement is "We make real what matters." And their goals are high quality patient care and affordable patient care. And so they're going through that dual front of trying to make it as best quality as possible and as cheap as possible, as healthcare is so important worldwide. Their values are employee responsibility, always act as if this were your own company, innovation, engineering, and automation. As we can tell, they've been able to develop such great innovation throughout the years. And then occupying attractive growth fields. And so that's going to be kind of one of those really interesting things to ask who we're meeting with, is kind of their occupying attractive growth fields. What does that look like as far as the future for Siemens Healthineers? Their organization, it's kind of interesting, the structure, and Kyle's going to talk a little about culture, and I think we can see kind of the European culture here. Businesses are bundled into 8 divisions: building technologies, digital factory, energy management, financial services, mobility, power and gas, power generation services, process industry, and drives. And so that's interesting how they break down those segments and kind of how they interwork with each other in the company. And then the 2 business units managed separately, and this is very important, is Siemens Healthineers and Siemens Wind Power. And as we start to get into the financials, you'll see how strategic these 2 business units are. Financials. So the Healthineers worldwide, this is global. Income profits is 2.3 billion euros, and that's a 6% growth year over year. Orders are at 13.8 billion, and they're up 4% year over year. And then revenue is sitting at 13.5 billion euros, and it's up 5% year over year. Profit margin is at 17.2%. And the target for their segment as a company, if you go through and read the 10K, was 15 to 19%. So they're doing something right. Siemens in China, this covers all market segments. This isn't just the Healthineers. Their revenue total is 6.4 billion euros, but it's down 7%. And despite how it is down 7%, the 10K identifies that the Healthineers is saving it from tanking completely in the other segments that they have. It's kind of an interesting statistic as you look at the international revenues to look at the factors of what is going on for all of the world for Siemens and their huge markets within the segments that they have. And so we see in Europe, Germany's identified. In the Americas, the US is identified. In Asia and Australia, China is identified. And as you see, there's that 6.4 billion euro figure that we have there. But Siemens is huge. Siemens is almost 80 billion euros. And so it's important to remember how large of an organization this is and what kind of effects that has. And not only are we going into China to look at the Healthineers, but we're also going into China noting that they have much of production and other assets that are there. And then next, the economic factors and risk. We've talked about this in class. Political risk is huge in China, especially for the Healthineers. Government policy, as you look at kind of how medical devices are regulated in the US and in Europe, there's also that kind of unknown of what's going to happen and how that's regulated. Financial risk, it's a multinational corporation and it's dealing with the different factors of crossing those borders when it comes to monies. And so the exchange rates and interest rates really factor in at this point. China's dynamic. And so we took this as a holistic view and then broke it down for the Healthineers. So China's dynamic is really interesting as the Healthineers identified, especially in their reporting. Healthcare spending is rising, and the orders for China have risen more than anywhere else in the world. And so that's important as we go into these meetings to understand that really they are the biggest growing segment of one of the largest divisions in the corporation. And it's due to the aging population, it's due to urbanization, it's due to those chronic diseases that are increasing, and the expanded access to healthcare is that urbanization. So it's kind of a conglomerate that's bringing China into a different world status. But they still face those issues that are governmental restrictions and centralized tendering and reimbursement budget controls in regards to health control. And so they're trying to face those forefronts as they grow within this growing market. And then the Healthineer investments is really interesting, especially within China. It's driven mainly in the diagnostic sector, which is a huge amount of profits. And it's driven by enhancing competitiveness and innovation. And then the investment portfolio, and it's really interesting to look at this as we get into such a technical world that the intangibles are growing in investment and portfolio in large amounts, and that generally means that that's in the software. And then R&D and new factories. And new factories is kind of one of those key points for China's dynamic as well.
Hey, this is Kyle. Now we're going to get into some of the cultural differences that we've seen with China and Siemens and what kind of Siemens is doing. As Justin pointed out, Siemens actually started in Germany, but Siemens Healthineer is quartered in Erlangen, Germany, and that's a city that is slightly south of kind of mid-east Germany. It's a little bit more east of Frankfurt. But one thing that they're planning on doing is they're expecting Siemens Healthineers in Shanghai to be a deep blend of Shanghainese culture and German background with their business. So it's going to be kind of interesting to get into the cross-culture that Siemens Healthineers kind of does. One thing that's kind of interesting is Siemens Healthineers is a geocentric organization. They more have a global mindset, and they go everywhere, kind of as Justin pointed out. They're in over 200 countries. But in that same degree, they're more of a polycentric as well. They identify with local countries when they go there, and they stay with the culture that those countries have. So yeah, there are over 200 countries internationally, and their main operations that they do in all of their organizations is manufacturing, R&D, sales, and marketing. And we'll kind of touch on this a little bit later, kind of near the end of the presentation. But we want to know how they choose where they go, what kind of products they do, if there's any type of strategic advantage in the locations that they go. But they want to be deeply rooted in international business, but they have the opportunity to go elsewhere. Some of the main products and services that Siemens Healthineers have is the medical imaging equipment. And these are the things like the ultrasound, the CT scans, the x-rays, and the imaging for radiation therapy. These are the types of things that most people think of when it's healthcare. And, these are the expensive ones that the doctors love using because they get to charge you up the wazoo for them. But the laboratory diagnostics, the immunoassay, it's a device that actually measures proteins in the body. So that's kind of an interesting one that they're coming out with. Hematology, urinalysis, and blood testing. Those are some of the other diagnostics that Siemens Healthineers provides. Now, when we get into the globalization of Siemens Healthineers, it's interesting because they have different products and different services depending on the organization that they're at. So, for example, in China, they have the services are customer added value, training institution, medical service and enterprises, laboratory diagnostics, and customer service. Customer service is kind of an interesting thing because they have it in all of their products and all of their services throughout the entire globe. But Germany, on the other hand, has just a couple different ways of the same services. For example, they have imaging and therapy services, IT standards, laboratory diagnostics, and customer information / registration. The IT standards are vital because as the world is changing and as technology is developing, IT is becoming more and more important. Now, one more thing with the United States, this is an interesting one for us that we found. The services that they provide are similar to the ones in Germany and in China, but they also have something extra. Before we get into that, we'll kind of go through the slightly different ones that they provide. First one is imaging and therapy, customer resources and logins, healthcare financial solutions, customer service, and laboratory diagnostic. So once again, you can see customer service on almost every single one of these services. But the interesting part about it is there are actually 16 different login and registration things that are available in the United States. People like to be able to log into their services and see what's going on with their healthcare. People like to be in the know. And the other countries, Germany and China, for example, don't have those same registration and login information available to them.
So this is back to Justin. What we want to do now here with this last slide, we're almost done, is we want to get you prepared for good questions to ask Siemens Healthineers while we're there. A couple of the questions we thought are, what cultural stress do you see between the corporate and China? With headquarters in Germany and with your local manufacturing being in China, what does it look like? Do they have stresses, or are they having water dragon type experiences because of the two different cultures? And what does the corporate structure look like? Are they more centralized, all the decisions made in one place? Or does Siemens Healthineers have quite a bit of anonymity? Are they more decentralized? Do they have their own decision? Or are they basically a bunch of sub-companies running themselves? Ask them about IPR. If they're going to start entering into the technology space, they are going to run into who's going to steal their stuff, or if that's even being developed in China. If the Healthineers company wants to be working in IT, how and what are they going to do to protect their IPR? And one curious question I have as an engineer, that's what I am, is how reverse engineerable is an MRI machine? Is that something that they actually have to their advantage because of the significant complexity of those machines is so difficult to replicate? Ask them, what do they see as their strategic advantage of being in China? What can Siemens accomplish because they're in China that some of their competitors, for example, are not going to be able to experience? Is it simply a labor thing, or are they gaining other cultural advantages through, I have no idea. Ask them. What types of things, what is their strategic advantage of being in China? And the last question we thought was worth it is, what market does expansion look like for them? What is their next play? As mentioned before, they are just dumping gobs of money into their analysis and to their IT space. And that at least appears on our side of things to be their next big play. But, let's ask them. Let's ask them, what does the market look like for the next 5 years? So as we're going there, think about these questions, ask them nicely and kindly that, that last one, we might get an answer of, we're not going to tell you because that's our own thing. And that's perfectly fine. But we just want to get you prepared, and we'll see you in China.